Yo, welcome back, everybody. Alright, so in this one, this is going to be the third installment of the Diane Downs case. And I honestly meant to put the Steve's version of the events into the other two videos, but I didn't. I'm sorry. I meant to, but I didn't. So this is actually when you hear stories about troubled relationships or whatever the case may be, my own opinion is there's always two sides to the story. There's her side and there's his side. You know what I mean? Or technically there's three sides. There's her side, there's his side, and then there's the actual truth. But in this video, you're going to get to hear Steve's side of the version of how the relationship between them two were and how the relationship between her and her kids were. So let's dive deep into this. And this actually is, I found a video the other day that's going to turn this into a 4-part series. I told you in the first video that this was going to be a 3-part series. Is actually going to turn into a 4-part series. But I think this video is important to understand the reality of the situation with Diane Downs, the way she was with her kids, and all the lies that she told about Steve. And I think this is going to help clarify a lot of that misconception.
My whole life, even as a child, all I really thought about, I used to carry dolls around on a pillow, and I wanted to be a mom.
What Diane Downs wanted more than anything else was to have children. She got her wish, but her dream turned into a twisted tragedy when she was sentenced to life for shooting her children because...
Y'all notice how she was smiling as she was being walked through whatever this corridor is. She was being walked through in handcuffs and she was smiling. And this was after what had happened. Like, what do you have to smile about? And that's a clear indication that she doesn't even feel bad about what she did.
Because her boyfriend didn't like kids. Even today, 5 years later, her former husband would like to see her pay the ultimate price.
I want to play that back real quick. I'm sorry, because I know I interrupted that, but I want that to be clearly understood as we go through this.
But her dream turned into a twisted tragedy when she was sentenced to life for shooting her children because her boyfriend didn't like kids.
See, she was sentenced to life in prison because her boyfriend didn't like kids. Mind you, this was a married woman at the time that all of this happened.
Even today, 5 years later, her former husband would like to see her pay the ultimate price.
Executed. That's what I was hoping for. That's what I still feel that they should have done that, you know. We'd all be better off.
But it was the children who would pay for what Diane wanted.
Diane's the type of woman who I think could cut your throat and then sit down and have lunch next to your body.
I wouldn't walk in there and say, this weird person came up out of nowhere and shot us for no reason and just left. I mean, that's not a believable story. I could have, if I had done this, I could have come up with a believable story.
But that's the story she gave. That's the crazy thing about that part, and this is why I wanted to cover this video today, is because that's the crazy part about that, is that's the story she told. Was that this man just came up out of nowhere, she stopped, got out of the car, and he shot her kids point blank after demanding her car. And again, in this video, I mentioned in the other videos that you were going to see her reenactment. In this one, you're actually going to see the reenactment, and you're going to see why this does not make sense. But that was the story she gave, was that this man was just in the middle of the road. He demanded her car. She didn't give it to him. He shot her kids, shot her in the arm, and then she drove off. That was her version of the story. So, I mean, her explanation of this just does not make sense. Like, to say, well, I could have come up with a believable story if I'd done this. Like, yeah, you could have, but you didn't. You did it, but you came up with a story that made no sense at all.
It really happened.
It was back in May of 1983, next to this creek, alongside this isolated country road outside of Springfield, Oregon, that this bizarre and tragic crime was committed. It was around 9:45 in the evening when Diane Downs said a man flagged down her car and demanded her keys. When she refused, he pulled out a pistol and shot her and her 3 small children.
I could smell the blood. I could smell the gunpowder. It was just a really, really horrible feeling.
But Diane says she somehow managed to escape and rushed to a nearby hospital. 7-year-old Cheryl was dead on arrival. 8-year-old Christy was shot twice in the chest. 3-year-old Danny was shot in the back and lay paralyzed.
Alright, a couple key points there. Number one, Diane's version of the story was that Cheryl was alive when they got to the hospital. By this news clip, she was dead on arrival. So she was already dead before they got there. But her version of the, when I say her, I mean Diane Downs' version of the story, was that Cheryl was still alive when they got there. And I mean, just none of this makes sense at all. And that's what's so bizarre about this case, is because, and again, that's how narcissists work. It's like they're literally going to spit out everything they can to make themselves look like the victim, so that they're not implicated for whatever crime it is that they commit, even though she knows she committed this. You just watch the reenactment. Like, we're going to get to that in a minute. Just, this entire story is bizarre. Like I said in the very first video that I covered on this case, like, I really dove deep into this, and none of this makes sense.
Diane, however, received only wounds to her forearm.
It was all wrong. From the beginning, it was wrong.
Detective Doug Welch was one of the first officers at the hospital that night, and although he didn't realize it at the time, this case would consume his life for many months to come.
Here was a woman who was completely apathetic about the welfare of her kids. She was just emotionally flat and preoccupied with something else.
That evening,
and I believe that, like, because when you heard just in the beginning of this video, you heard her version of events. It's literally like a script. Like, she's just reading off of a script, and that's what it sounds like. And I even pointed out in the first video that I covered on this story, was that there was no emotion whatsoever. She was just a matter of fact kind of thing. Like, there was no emotions whatsoever involved in her versions of the events that happened. And like I said, me personally, as a parent, if my kid had been shot by a stranger, number one, I want to know who he is, and number two, you better hope the cops find him before I do. Period. But she didn't have that mentality. She was just like, oh yeah, this is what happened. Yeah, no big deal. This is what happened. And that's what it sounds like to me. Is because, like I said, she's just basically reading off of a script.
and the next day, police were out in full force, looking for any clues that would lead them to the man that Diane claimed did the shooting, later to be known as the bushy-haired stranger.
I'm throwing the keys, okay? I'm throwing the keys.
4 days later, as
Alright, this is the reenactment that I had mentioned in the very first video. I apologize that I did not put it in sooner, but I wanted y'all to see what I meant in the last video when I said her version of events just doesn't make sense, because the way she plays this out is not a viable story for somebody who just shot 3 kids and is just going to let her drive off.
one child was being buried, the other two still in intensive care, Diane reenacted for police what happened that night. Besides wondering why a woman with children would stop her car and get out for a strange man, detectives couldn't help but notice Diane seemingly carefree.
You notice how she just, and this is what I meant by her version of the story doesn't make sense, and the whole reenactment part doesn't make sense. It's like she clearly showed it, how she faked throwing the keys and how she pushed the guy off and how she jumped in the car. And in a minute you're going to hear that she had to put the keys in the ignition, start the car, and whatever the case may be. But that still gives the gunman plenty of time to turn around and put a bullet in her head. Period. But she only took a shot to the arm. Meanwhile, one kid took a shot to the chest. And another one took 2 shots to the back. And I think the other one took a shot to the chest as well. And she only took a shot to the arm?
Attitude.
I just hit my cast. Started the car and left. The car door shut itself. God dang.
I mean, how messed up is that? You're reenacting the events of that night, and you're literally making a joke about it? That would be... Anybody who actually went through this in a realistic term, where their kids were shot by somebody else, this would not be a joking matter. But that just lets you know where her mindset is. Like, she's not even thinking about the kids or anything like it's all about her. The attention she's getting. And honestly, I learned this about narcissists. It doesn't matter if it's good attention or bad attention, as long as they're getting attention. That's all they care about, really, is they want everybody on them. They want all eyes on them. They want everybody to think about them. And this kind of looks like that to me, is that this woman is not even concerned about how the media is looking at how this situation affected her kids. She's literally just feeding off the attention that she's getting.
Sure, I could sit here and cry and be all upset. And what's it going to prove? It proves nothing.
Yeah. Oh, and again, like, make that one make sense. Well, I can sit here and cry and be all upset, but what does that prove? That proves you're a caring parent, dumbass. Like, I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I'm not the type that just cries over any little thing. But if you shot my kid, if I had multiple kids, I only have one, but if I had multiple kids, you shot one of mine to death, you paralyzed another one, or you put two of the other ones in ICU, I'm going to be very emotional about that, and I don't care if I'm crying on TV. Because that's definitely going to make me very emotional. And I don't care about how people are going to view me for that. And that's what most parents would do. Most caring parents. Let me rephrase that. Most caring parents would do that. But this, to me, is a red flag that somebody's going to sit here and say, well, I could cry and I could do this and I could do that, but what is that going to prove? That's going to prove that you actually cared about your kids. But the fact that you can't cry about it proves you don't care at all. And in my opinion, that's just more indication that you're the one who has something to do with it.
I am who I am, and I can't prove that I'm anybody other than what I am.
Diane was brought up in a strict religious family in Phoenix. She graduated from high school with straight A's. She married Steve Downs at 17, and almost immediately they had children.
I got pregnant when I wasn't allowed to, and I'm not saying he forbade me to get pregnant, but I didn't consult him. I wanted to have children, and so I got pregnant without asking permission.
Well, once she had the kids, it was another story, she treated them like crap,
And see, this is why I wanted to cover this story. Like, that's what I meant when I say, like, I honestly, I meant to put this clip in the very first video that I done covering the Diane Downs case. Because he clearly pointed out, like, she treated them like crap. And her version of the story was she wanted to have kids. She did it without his consent. She wanted to have kids. And she's trying to make it out like she was a great mother. And he's, like, laying it out there like, no, she treated them kids like crap.
She really didn't treat them very good.
Christy and Cheryl came early in the marriage. Little Danny came later, the result of an affair. Diane then became a...
Little Danny came later as a result of an affair. So Danny wasn't even... Danny wasn't even her husband's kid. That was a result of an affair. And if you saw, I think it was in the first video that I covered of this, where she had mentioned that if he wasn't going to give her a kid, then she was going to step outside of marriage and find somebody who would. And so that's where Danny came from. So that's a pretty messed up thing to do. And again, that's a very narcissistic thing to do. It's like, this man had already gave you 2 kids. And he could have gave you a 3rd one. And even if he said, I don't want a 3rd one, as a wife, and her version of the very first video that I posted, that she thought that if she was a good wife, if she was caring, if she was loving, if she was this and if she was that, this man would change. But it's clear that she's the one that had the problem. Because he gave her 2 kids. He married her. He gave her a house to live in. But that still wasn't enough. She kept wanting more. And this is the way narcissists are, is nothing is ever enough. They want more, they want more, they want more, and they want more. It never stops. Nothing you can ever give them is going to be enough to satisfy their needs. And Steve understood this. Steve was like, look, I done gave you 2 kids. I don't want any more. And she was like, okay, well, if you're not going to give me another kid, I'm going to step outside the relationship and I'm going to have a kid by somebody else. And she even mentioned, as I posted, and I'm pretty sure it was in the first video, that she had stepped outside the relationship, and she said she started looking at people around where she worked and looking for a quote-unquote specimen, a good specimen, I'm sorry. Somebody who was, fit, physically fit, non-drinker, non-smoker, no drugs, blah, 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 whatever she said she was looking for. But that's, whatever she found, the specimen that she found was outside of her marriage, and that was the father of Daniel. Or Danny, whatever his name was.
Surrogate mother, bearing a child for another woman. After 8 years, the marriage ended in divorce.
I mean, does that really surprise anybody that the marriage ended in divorce after 8 years? Like I said, if she's willing to step outside of her marriage to have a 3rd kid, mind you, this man, Steve, had already given her 2 kids. And by the time Danny was born, there was actually one before him that she herself aborted. She claims Steve wanted her to do it, but I don't buy that story one bit. I don't buy that story one bit that she wanted Steve to abort that kid. I believe she aborted that kid because it was Steve's. That's my opinion. I don't have any video or any evidence to back that up. I wish I did, and if I can ever find it, I will be happy to share that with you. But in my personal opinion, I believe the reason she aborted the 3rd child was because it was Steve's. And she didn't want another child by Steve. She wanted another child by somebody else. Even though from the way it looks, Steve gave her 2 beautiful daughters. That's the way it looks to me. And Steve was a happy father. And so, but that's just the way narcissists are. Is they don't consider what he wants. They don't consider what anybody else wants. They don't consider about the effect it has on anybody. The only thing they consider is what they want and what they need to do to get it. That's it.
It was a woman that really got around, you know. Of course, I really didn't know that. Hey, you know, you're not supposed to. You're the husband. You're supposed to be the last to know.
In 2 years' time, I had 10 separate lovers.
Now, if you go back to one of the other 2 videos, I can't remember which one I covered it on because there's already been 2 videos posted on this story. But if you go back to those videos, she mentioned, no, it was the last one that I had posted, where she had the secretly recorded phone calls with Robert Knickerbocker, where she claims that they were trying to pin the stuff on some other guy that they claimed she had an affair with. And she said she didn't have an affair. This lady literally just there and said she had 10 different partners in 2 years. You can't tell me she didn't have an affair. 10 different partners in 2 years. And this is why I wanted to cover this particular video today, is because I wanted to lay all the facts out there so you can make your own opinion of what you think about this case. And I would love to hear your comments or your opinions on this story. Honestly, me personally, like, I love communicating with the people who comment in my comment section. So feel free to leave your opinion, and I'll be happy to, you know, reply to those, and, you know, we can have a conversation about it. Like, let me know what you think about this.
2 years. That's not very many. And less than half of them were married.
Just real quick. 10 different partners in 2 years. Oh, well, that's not a big deal. And half of them were married? Oh, but that's not a big deal either? Really? Again, leave in the comments what you think about that one. Please, I would love to hear y'all's opinions on this story. I really would. And I would love to have a conversation about this, because this is my opinion, and I would love to hear y'all's opinions on this story. And, you know, let's just have a conversation about that, because, I mean, this is just an interesting story to me, is how disassociated she is with reality.
Diane worked as a letter carrier here at the Chandler Post Office just outside of Phoenix. This is where she would meet a fellow employee, a married man who she would have an intimate relationship with. According to Oregon police, that man would be the reason why she would later try to kill her children.
Robert Knickerbocker told Diane he would divorce his wife of 10 years and marry her. But there was one problem. You see, he didn't have kids, and he didn't want kids.
Well, hey, I don't have a problem with you having a relationship with anybody, you know, especially if it's going to work into something serious. And how does he feel about the kids? Oh, well, he doesn't want anything to do with the kids. He hates kids. He can't have kids, and he had a vasectomy so that he can't have kids.
Proves my point right there. I've actually proved a few points right there. Number one, that's a clear motive as to why she did what she did. And he didn't even care. Like, Steve didn't even care. He was like, I don't care who you have a relationship with. What does he think about the kids? Oh, but he hates kids. He doesn't want kids. He had a vasectomy. He can't have kids. So, when you go back to, I think it was the first video that I posted on the Diane Downs case, she had mentioned that Steve was the one that had the vasectomy, and this is why I cleared that up, is that Steve was not the one that had the vasectomy. Robert Knickerbocker was the one that had the vasectomy. And then she by his own admission, she said, well, he hates kids, he doesn't want kids. That's clear motive as to why she did what she did. And if you go back to the very last video that I did, the secretly recorded phone calls between Diane Downs and Robert Knickerbocker, you can see the connection or how obsessed she was with him. And so it's not far-fetched to say that she would do whatever it took to get him to come to her. You know what I mean? It's not really that far-fetched. So to say that she would kill her own kids for that man is not really... It's not really that bizarre of an indication. Because, in my opinion, and again, this is my opinion, you're welcome to leave in the comments your opinions. My opinion is that was clear motive as to why she did what she did, was because the man that she wanted made it very perfectly clear that he did not want to be a dad, and she thought the only thing stopping him from coming, because by this man's on a mission, by Steve's on a mission, and even by her on a mission, and even Robert Knickerbocker's, is that he was willing to leave his wife of 10 years for her. The only problem was the kids were in the way. So that's a clear motive as to why she did what she did. In my opinion, again, that's my opinion. This is not factual information. I haven't seen anything that says this is exactly why she did what she did. This is my opinion as to why she did what she did. And I'm pretty sure other people can share the same opinion. But, again, this is not facts. Like, there's not been anything any court transcripts that says she did this for this reason. But in my personal opinion, she did this because a man that she was interested in, who was willing to leave his wife, would not leave his wife unless the kids were not there, because he did not want to be a dad. So she felt her only option was to remove the kids by extreme measures.
On and on and on.
Diane and the children moved to Springfield, Oregon. She set up a new life in this apartment house and waited for her boyfriend to get a divorce and join her, but he never showed up. According to police, she became obsessed with trying to get him, writing him letters every day, but they would come back unopened.
He would change his mind on a daily basis. I'm coming, I'm going, I'm coming, I'm going. I want a divorce, I've changed my mind, I don't want a divorce. A week and a half later, he changes his mind, he doesn't want a divorce, okay?
This was a real obstacle as far as Diane was concerned.
And if you watch the last video, the last one's not got that many views, but that's the last one was the conversations, the recorded conversations between her and Robert Knickerbocker, where he claimed, well, I didn't want anything to do with the kids. I didn't want to be there. I told you I wasn't moving to Oregon. I told you I didn't want to be a dad. And she actually mentioned, well, that doesn't hold water because you always change your mind, and it takes you a few months to change your mind back. But he clearly did not want to be a dad. And again, that is clear motive as to why she did what she did.
Those kids were a burden, and there was no way that she could see that she was going to get this guy up to Oregon as long as she had the kids.
Along with the letters, this statuette was found in Diane's apartment, inscribed at the base, to Christy, Cheryl, and Daniel. I love you, Mom. dated just 6 days before the shooting.
And tell me that's not premeditated. Tell me that's not premeditated. She planned on all three of them being dead. Now, Christy's actually the one that ended up dying. Cheryl and Daniel lived. But you tell me that's not premeditated, and you tell me there's not motive in that situation. You tell me she didn't have a reason as to why she did what she did. And it was solely to get a man that did not want the kids. She felt and even the detective laid it out there. Like, he dug deeper into it than I did, and I've dug pretty deep into it. But he dug deeper into it than I did, and even he concluded that she did this because she felt that was the only way to get him to divorce his wife and come be with her, was to get rid of the kids. And this, as he stated, was 6 days, like you see, May 13th, 1983. This was 6 days before that event happened. So she, again, tell me that's not premeditated.
Police believe this was not a gift, but a memorial, because soon Diane would be without her children.
And that was the plan, is that soon she would be without her kids, because her plan was to get rid of the kids to get the man that she wanted.
The town of Springfield was shocked by the crime. Diane proclaimed herself the victim of an unknown madman. But as police investigated, they found no evidence to support her story about a bushy-haired stranger. Instead, everything pointed to Diane. Most damaging were the slugs found at the scene. Police say they were fired from a .22 Ruger pistol. Although the weapon was never found, Diane was known to have a similar gun.
And I actually brought that one up in both of my other videos, was the fact that they were shot by a .22 Ruger. And she was known to have a .22 Ruger. And if you listen to the last video, and only a few people did, unfortunately that one didn't get as many views as I had hoped. But if you go back and listen to that one, you'll hear the conversation where Robert Knickerbocker mentions that he saw that particular gun in the back of her car the night she left his house to go back to Oregon. So he's well aware that gun was still in her possession when he left his house. Or when she left his house, I'm sorry. When she left his house, that gun was still in her possession. He's well aware of that. And in that video I actually mentioned that she was trying to convince him that he didn't see it, even though he did see it. But that's an important fact of this case, is that he saw it in the back of her car the night she left for Oregon, which was the day before this incident happened.
We were able to learn that she did have a Ruger.
That she had that gun, and she pulled that gun out and shot those kids with it.
Police were unable to crack Diane's story about a crazed killer who only demanded her car keys and said nothing more before shooting her children. But during a tape-recorded police interrogation, she slipped, changed the story, and said that the man had called her by name and threatened to kill her if she talked.
This individual talked to you, referred to you by name, and also referred to your tattoo.
Right.
As close as you can.
And this is another reason why I wanted to cover this particular clip in this video, is because if you go back to the other two videos I covered on this story, she mentioned it was a bushy-haired stranger, that she didn't know it was just some guy wandering in the middle of the road. And now she's claiming this guy called her by name. So keep that one in mind.
Remember, what did he tell you?
If you say anything about what happened here, that they'd come back and kill me.
It wasn't an intentional lie, though. I didn't
But you
just
changed
sit
your
there.
story.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't an intentional lie. And most lies that come from narcissists are not intentional. They're just, it's lie on top of lie on top of lie, and narcissists have a hard time keeping up with their own stories or their own version of events. So their stories are going to change as time goes on, and that's just the way it works. It's not an intentional lie, but it was still a lie because she forgot what she said to somebody else. Like maybe she said that to somebody else, and so when she told the cops that, it was a slip up because that's what she said to somebody else. That was a version of the events that she said to one of her friends. You know what I mean? So their lies are not intentional, but that's just the way narcissists are. Is they stack lie on top of lie on top of lie, and they can't keep up with all the lies that they're telling. So eventually they're going to slip up.
I agree. I mean, you know, you've heard it. It's obvious.
Doesn't that make it seem kind of tough to believe what you're saying? If you change your story 2 months after the shooting?
I'm sorry. I mean, I'm not saying that you have to believe me. I'm not saying that anybody has to believe me. But I know within myself, I can sit here with a clear conscience and know that I did not shoot my kids.
There was only circumstantial evidence to go on. Police felt they needed more. They had to talk to the 2 surviving children. Danny was too young, and Christy had suffered a stroke as a result of her gunshot wounds and had difficulty speaking.
Why wouldn't they arrest me if I did it? If they really had this evidence, I say they didn't have the evidence.
Finally, police arrested Diane, and incredibly, she was pregnant once again.
So if they didn't have the evidence, why would they be able to arrest her? Make that one make sense. If they did not have the evidence, why would they be able to arrest her? I mean, because I happen to know you cannot get a search, you can't get an arrest warrant without sufficient evidence and sufficient probable cause. So obviously there was a lot of evidence that pointed to her.
Throughout the trial, the public would see Diane being led to the courthouse in a maternity gown and handcuffs.
The trial was held here at the Lane County Courthouse in Eugene. And although the prosecution felt they had a strong case, they were still concerned about their only eyewitness. Would little Christy Downs, now 9 years old, be able to take the stand and testify against her mother?
In an emotional and oftentimes tense account, Christy Downs told the jury what happened that night. When asked, "Who shot you?" she replied, "Mom did."
Bam! And this is why I wanted to cover this. It's like a lot of people do not take a kid's account of situations into consideration, and that in itself is a problem, especially when she's clearly sitting there saying, she's asked the question, "Who shot you?" And she said, "My mom did it." And mind you, this entire time, if you watch the other 2 videos, the entire time, and even in this video, the mom swore up and down that somebody else did it. That she did not shoot her kids and blah, 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 blah. But this is a clear confession by her daughter that my mom shot me. I know who shot me, and it was my mom who shot me. And this is why I wanted to cover this, because this is so messed up that CPS could have been involved so many times and could have done something about this. They could have stopped this, because if you go back, the reason I covered this was when I done the video about why narcissists are not good parents. And Little Shaman mentioned Diane Downs, and she mentioned that CPS has been involved many times, and the oldest one was reported of being more or less the caretaker. You know what I mean? And so CPS has been involved in this situation several times, and they did nothing about it. And this is why I do these videos, is because it should not take this type of action for CPS to do something about it. Like, their job is to protect these kids, and they're clearly overlooking all of the red flags. In every situation that revolves this type of incident, it always comes down to CPS ignoring the red flags. And this is why I do the videos that I do, is because it's time that we wake up. It's time that we start looking at the real problem. It's time that we start taking this serious. Because, again, as I said in other videos, how many more kids have got to die? How many more kids have got to suffer before CPS wakes up and realizes that not all mothers are good mothers? How many situations like this is it going to take for CPS to say, we got to do better? Because y'all have got to do better. We as taxpayers are paying you to protect our kids. These kids could have easily been protected if you would have done your job. But because you didn't, one kid died. One kid ended up in paralyzed from the waist down. And the other kid ended up well, actually the two surviving kids ended up in the ICU. But one of them ended up paralyzed. The other one ended up with a very traumatic experience that's going to haunt them for the rest of their life. All that could have been prevented if CPS would have done their job. Period.
Her daughter Christy testified that
She replied, "Mom did."
Her daughter Christy testified that Mom stopped the car, got out, and then walked to the trunk where she obtained something. We feel it was a murder weapon. And then walked back where she reached inside and shot the kids. After that, we think that Diane then shot herself.
A jury found Diane Downs guilty.
And to me, that is actually a more believable story than the one that Diane Downs came up with. Like, you got a kid that says, we just stopped on the side of the road. My mom got out the car. She went to the back. She came back and she shot us all. And then she shot herself in the arm. That's a more believable story than the one that Diane Downs came up with. In my opinion, please feel free to leave in the comments what you think about that. In my opinion, that's a more believable story.
Guilty of murder and attempted murder and sentenced her to life in prison.
Look at how she's still smirking. Like, I cannot. And this is what drives me insane about this whole case, is that she smirks through the entire ordeal. Every time you see her, she's smiling and smirking. And, like, what is there to smile about? If all three of your kids were shot in the way that she claims, if by her admission some stranger shot her kids and shot her, what would you have to smile about? Like, any other normal parent would be devastated by this event, and she's smiling about it. That doesn't make sense to me.
Where she would later have her baby and give it up for adoption. But after serving only 3 years in prison, she escaped by scaling over a barbed wire fence. Diane was now on the run and a threat once again, but she says she was looking for the bushy-haired stranger.
I wanted revenge at that time.
Alright. Just real quick, because you're going to find out in a second that's not true at all. But she claims the reason she escaped because she was looking for the guy that did this. So mind you, if it had been me, I'd have found that dude a long time ago. But just keep this one in mind. She escaped because she was looking for the bushy-haired stranger. But watch what... Listen to where they found her.
I wanted to do some really obscene things to his body.
But instead, 11 days later, she was apprehended, hiding in a nearby house with a former cellmate's husband.
See what I mean? She claims she escaped to find this bushy-haired man, but she was found in the house of a former cellmate's husband. Make that one make sense.
Diane Downs is now held in a maximum security prison in New Jersey, where she's working on her latest appeal.
Why are you here?
I don't know. I don't know.
Doesn't that kill you?
No,
Why?
I'm a survivor.
She's destroyed so many people, and I think without one shred of regret. I don't think there's any regret in her body.
My opinion, I agree with this man 100%. I don't see one single ounce of regret, one single ounce of remorse for anything that she did. Out of all the lives that she ruined, I don't see one single ounce of regret or remorse.
That I don't think she's ever come to grips, with what's happened. I mean, the gravity of what's happened. The kids especially.
And narcissists can't. And that's the problem. Is narcissists cannot understand how their actions affect other people. And this is why I say CPS needs to do a better job at understanding this type of situation. Is because narcissists are not capable of understanding how their actions affect other people. The only thing they think about is their self. So if you made it this far, I appreciate it. I really do. I appreciate all you viewers who watch my videos, and all the subscribers. Like, really, honestly, I truly appreciate all of y'all. So with all that being said, like I said, leave in the comments your opinions, your thoughts, your comments, what you think about this story, and if you agree with me or disagree with me, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. Me personally, I don't delete any comments. I don't block any comments. I'm a full believer in the First Amendment, that everybody has a right to their own opinions, and and this is open to the public, so you have the right to your own opinion. So like I said, leave in the comments what you think about this story, and I'd love to talk to you about it. I really would. Like, I love reaching out to the viewers who actually view and comment on my videos. I love reaching out to y'all. I love talking to y'all, because me personally, that's why I do what I do. Like, I just like being part of the community, and like I said, I'm just that type of person. Like, I love interacting with other people. Whether we have a difference of opinions or not, it doesn't matter. But if it's something we can have a conversation about, I'm open to it. So with all that being said, I hope y'all enjoyed the video. If you did, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, and I will see y'all in the next one. Y'all have a good one.